Hey folks, someone on one of my recent videos had asked me what my top 3 favorite knives were, or could I please make a video detailing my top 3 knives. And so the 3 you see before you are in fact my 3 favorite EDC knives right now. So I actually have a few more knives that if I had to just say knives in general, it would be a crowded list. But just bringing it down to EDC knives, knives that I will carry on my person regularly, these are my top 3 right now. And it's subject to change, but after carrying all of these for a decent amount of time, they've really kind of earned their spot in my top 3. My original, and this is one of my longest running favorite knives of all time, is the Benchmade 806 D2, also known as the AFCK, or Advanced Folding Combat Knife. We've got a D2 steel blade. It is right around 4 inches on the blade. I think it's 3.9 inches. Forgive me for not remembering the length off the top of my head. It's a long knife, and it is an excellent design. It's got a great clip on there. The Benchmade clip, this style anyway, is one of my favorite clip designs ever. I think it's really basic, very subtle. It's a really strong clip. The thickness and the weight and the blade are just, they're fantastic. It's just been an absolute favorite of mine for many years, and this has gotten a lot of use. This is one of my most used EDC knives. Still has quite a bit of that the coating on there, but you can see there's a lot of scratches, a lot of wear. It's been holding up pretty good over the years. It's got that nice oval opening hole, which for Benchmade I prefer that they stuck with their own design, the oval opening hole rather than the round opening hole. I like to keep that exclusive to Spyderco. Not a big deal, just something, a preference I have. You can kind of see my blade is actually not ground completely even. It kind of points to the side there. It's always done it. I've tried numerous things to fix it, and nothing has ever really changed it from that position, but it's just one of those things. It's not rubbing the scale. Doesn't bother me. Absolutely love this knife. It opens quickly. You can use the axis lock to flick it open and close. You can thumb it out, so you can flick it with the oval hole and flick it, like a Spyderco, just fine. You can also, open and close it a little bit slower so as not to surprise anyone that's not expecting it. But beautiful knife. I wish this were still in production. I know they had a limited edition run of these with slightly different materials, and I think that's already been discontinued, so not sure how easy it is to get your hands on one of those, but this knife is never going to leave me. I wish I had a second one to use as a backup. I'd beat on this one a little bit more. I carried it actually as a work knife for a while too, but that's in my top 3. I won't say which one's number 1 because I couldn't really narrow it down that much. I just liked so many knives. It's just too hard narrowing it all down, but that one definitely ranks in the top 3. Another one you see here is the orange Spyderco Paramilitary 2. This one is in the CTS XHP steel, and this is another knife that just on all points it just hits just right. Blade length a little bit shorter. Excuse me. Blade length a little bit shorter on this one. It doesn't have quite the length of the 806, as you can see. It's got a nice belly to it with a good curve, and it cuts like a bigger knife, like a longer blade. And that full flat grind blade is really nice, and it slices really, really well. Still quite thin. Kind of put those side by side. They're pretty similar in blade thickness. The jimping isn't too aggressive. As you all know, I'm not the biggest fan, and I like that it's kept to a minimum. It's not overly aggressive like on some blades. The round opening hole is large on the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. It is easy to open even with gloved fingers, which I've done. You can flick it open. You can use the compression lock similar to the axis lock and flick the knife out if you like. This one's being a little bit stubborn on camera, but I assure you it can be flicked. Just not when I'm sitting here trying to do it on purpose. I don't typically flick this knife out. Well, I will, but with my thumb rather than using the compression lock. And speaking of the compression lock, I love it. I've been using this knife for a while, as well as the black version, or the black handled version of this knife, which has S30V steel. And it's been great. I have been really happy with the steel on each of them, and I've been really happy with its performance. This one I haven't sharpened too much, and you can see it's still got quite a bit of the factory edge, just a little bit of stropping. And I have to admit, it's because of that limited edition or exclusive orange G10 scales. I've been babying this one a little bit more. So this one is also kind of filling in my top 3 for the standard black G10 version. But just such a great blade. Another beautiful pocket clip, very comfortable. You know, not too ostentatious. You know, it doesn't really stand out or detract from the knife in any way. It's very simple, very subtly designed, very effective. Holds in my pocket very well. Obviously not a deep carry clip. None of these have a deep carry clip, but not a big deal for me because I don't. I find it a little bit easier if a little bit of the knife sticks up out of my pocket. It makes it easier to grab. So that's another one of my favorites. And then this one really surprisingly skyrocketed to the top. And I actually have a few issues with this knife, but in spite of those issues, this is still one of my favorite EDC knives of all time. So this is the Cold Steel American Lawman. And you can see I have this set for tip up right hand carry. You can also there's two clips in the box when you purchase it, and you can grab the other clip if you're a lefty and switch it to the other side, so it'll have that same curve to it, just running the other way. That's a nice touch that they include the clips in there. I'll speak about that little scuff right there in a moment. That's actually on purpose. And a full review is coming on this soon. I just haven't gotten around to it. I love this knife. I love the blade. I love the shape, the grind. The handle is super comfortable. The weight, the little finger choil at the base of the blade is excellent. It lets you move up on a little bit farther, you know, along the handle so that you can get in for some finer cutting. The jimping on there's none on the blade, which I appreciate. There is a little bit on the handle, as you can see there on the spine, but it's very subtle. It is effective. This will hold your thumb in there or your finger if you push with enough force, so it'll actually provide a little bit of traction, but it's not overly grippy. One of the things that people talk about is the very aggressive G10 that Cold Steel uses on a lot of their folding knives. And this one is definitely very aggressive. However, I was surprised that I have not found the need to sand it down. I did flex the clip on the Lawman out a little bit so that it's, you know, so there isn't as much tension pushing against the G10 handle. But as far as the overall G10 itself, I know some people have sanded it down. Mine has already worn down in my pocket a little bit, so it's not quite as scratchy. It's not quite as grabby. And I don't really see the need to sand it down more, at least not at this point. You know, talk to me in a year and I'll let you know if I changed it. But for now, I think it's just the perfect amount of traction. And it is really aggressive. This thing, if your hands are wet or slippery, you know, as Cold Steel likes to say in their ad copy, if your hands are bloody or oily or whatever, you will not have any problems keeping a grip on this knife. It's just, I mean, you have to feel one to know how aggressive the texturing is, and it's excellent. The blade, the grind you can see is like a high hollow grind, very effective. It cuts and kind of feels, you can see I've got some oil on it, it cuts and feels like a full flat grind. So even though it's of a very thick stock, as you can see there, right at the edge it's been ground down so thin and so fine that it just slices through anything with ease. One of the things that I don't like about this knife, and I'll mention this again in a review, one of the things I don't like is that I can't flick the knife, and the back spring tension is so strong that, I mean, there's just no hope for me to flick it with my thumb. Now, some of you probably have one of these at home and are watching this video and saying, I can thumb flick mine just fine. Well, the reason for that is that these will ship with different tension from the factory. I had read that online, and I know for a fact that it is so because I had purchased one of these for my brother-in-law for his birthday, and shortly afterward I liked it so much I bought one for myself. His, he can flick open, so his doesn't have as much back spring tension there, and he can flick his open just fine. I don't even want to try because I feel like mine's going to fly back on my fingertips. I have tried a few times, unsuccessful. I can usually get the blade out to about there, and then I kind of have to snap it out the rest of the way, which to me seems unsafe and unnecessary. So I don't like the spring tension on mine, and mine also, the blade when locked open seats far deeper into the lock channel than his. So on my brother-in-law's, when you go to unlock the blade, and I do like to try and unlock them one-handed, I'll take my thumb and push into the lock bar at the back, and his blade will just drop like that. And what you're not seeing, or what you're not understanding by watching this on video, is that I am putting an extreme amount of pressure on the lock bar in order to get that blade to drop. I'm really forcing in. You can actually see how I'm leaving an indentation on my thumb there in order to push the lock bar in far enough. So typically what I'll do with my blade when I want to close it is I will actually take the joint there on my thumb, take the bone, and while I'm holding it sideways, I'll squeeze the bone all the way into the lock bar, and then that'll drop it against my finger. I'll move my fingers and then close it the rest of the way. Not a big deal, just something that, you know, irks me a little bit, that there can be that sort of variation from the factory, that some have a lot of tension, that some are set deeper than others. You know, is one version any safer or any longer lasting than any others? I have no idea. It's just something to note, and just something, a little flaw or a little quirk about this knife that bugs me. I kind of wish I had the looser spring and the slightly less recessed channel that would let the blade fall a little bit sooner. Perhaps it'll change over time. I don't know. Other than that, the build of the knife, fantastic, very strong, very stout. The handle feels thick. Let me get the Paramilitary 2 next to it for a comparison. It feels thicker than it is, and I mean, it might be a hair thicker than the Paramilitary 2, but not significantly, and it just feels like a handful of a knife. It's very thick. The lock, every time you hear it open, you can hear that clack. That's even more impressive in person. It's a very metallic, clanking kind of snap every time that it opens. It really opens with authority. And the lockup, just as Cold Steel likes to brag, is just absolutely rock solid. As with any knife, if I crank it really hard from side to side, you know, holding at the end of the blade and then, you know, twisting or bending at the pivot, I can introduce a little bit of wobble, but I don't consider that to be blade play. And vertically, there is no movement. I mean, absolutely none. This is probably, vertically speaking, this has the strongest lockup, or the tightest lockup, of any folding knife that I have ever used. So that's, I think, is saying a lot, because I've used quite a few knives. And then this video is going on a little bit long, but I'm just trying to, you know, detail the things I like about these knives. I guess on this one I'm kind of telling you some stuff I don't like, but you know, that's all part of it. I did want to mention here on the back where you see that some of that paint, or that little coating, is scratched away. When I bought this knife, or actually I should say when I originally was looking at the Cold Steel American Lawman, I had heard that the coating comes off very easily and that it was more like a paint coating. A lot of people online a couple years ago had said that you could just put some paint thinner on it and it would just bubble up and wipe off. Well, I went and did a little bit more research before I went out and purchased some paint thinner, and I found that the latest versions of the Cold Steel American Lawman, or at least the latest runs, have a different coating than the older knives. And I believe this also goes for the Recon series and perhaps some of their other folding knives, that the coating now is much more aggressive and stays on a lot better, wears a lot better, and takes longer to come off. And for those reasons, it also is very difficult to remove it yourself. Now, I'm not a big fan of black blades. They're kind of cool for a little bit, but I really appreciate, you know, just the bare metal appearance. And with the American Lawman, one of the cool things is it's well known that the blade actually has a really nice stonewashed finish. And that's one of my absolute blade finishes ever. So I want to expose that and check it out. So what I plan on doing is using some of the techniques I've read online where folks talk about just kind of gently scraping away the blade coating. So I'm going to disassemble this knife. I may make a video on it and show it. So I may make a video showing the disassembly of the knife and then scratch the coating free from the blade, maybe polish it a little bit, and then reassemble it. And so what I was doing with the lock bar there is just doing a quick little test run. I actually used the screwdriver from my Leatherman Squirt, the little P4, and I mean, that came off with literally almost no pressure. I just gently brushed it against the back and it just started chipping up. And you can't, or you probably won't be able to tell on camera, but it's not really scratched at all. It just, I mean, the coating just kind of flakes away. So I'm hoping that I'll experience that same level of ease removing all of the coating. But if not, you'll hear about it. Whether or not I show a video of it, I will explain, you know, how I did it and what method I used to remove it and how long it took. But that's something I'm excited to do. I'm also going to probably remove the coating from the pocket clip here. And hopefully that'll just be shiny metal. This will be a beautiful stonewash finish here. And then this will be bare as well. So I'm kind of excited for that little project. I do want to make a review before I go and make that change. And then after I make my review, then I'll go ahead and remove that coating. So these are my current 3 favorites. Like I said, if I had to list every knife I liked, it would be an endless list. It would just be dozens upon dozens of folding knives. But I thought I'd narrow it to EDC knives, and these are definitely my top 3 favorites. The things that I look for in an EDC knife are size. I do tend to lean towards larger blades. These two are actually not the longest blades I've got, and so I think it speaks volumes about them as to how well they function, how much they are small knives that tend to act or tend to feel like a larger knife, which I think is very, very cool. the Benchmade, this one, it's just a huge favorite of mine that I'm just going to love for years to come. It's just a great design, and I just wish it was still in production. I hope Benchmade will get some good feedback from people that had purchased their limited edition run, and hopefully they'll bring that back to full production so a lot of new knife enthusiasts can try one out for a reasonable price. So once again, that is the Benchmade 806 D2, also known as the AFCK. This is the Spyderco Paramilitary 2. This was the exclusive cutlery shop exclusive in orange G10 with CTS XHP steel, and the standard cold steel American Lawman. My current 3 favorite EDC knives. I hope to come back with some new reviews very soon, as well as some EDC updates, so please look forward to those videos. And I thank you so much for all joining me and tuning in for another video. I'll talk to you real soon. Bye.